I'm very excited to introduce everyone, our speakers, as well as the topic of today's webinar, which is lessons learned from Lennox International's journey from a legacy global trade management system to SAP Global Trade Services Edition for HANA. So good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to this webinar. Over the course of the next 40 to 45 minutes. Our general outline agenda is going to be, the first part is going to be dedicated to basically about the context of Lennox's journey going from a legacy global trade management system to GTS Edition for HANA. Their decision to choose GTS as the software of choice, as well as building the internal business case, as well as the rationale behind choosing the software and getting it approved through their internal processes as well. In the second part, we're going to go into actual lessons learned through the course of the project. And we know there's a lot of interest in GTS Edition for HANA, which is the latest release. And a lot of customers that are actually on GTS 11 or earlier are contemplating moving to this new release or the successor product. There will be some lessons around that specific topic. While this webinar is not focused on an upgrade process, it should definitely give you some lessons learned regardless of where you're coming from, whether you're coming from a GTS 11 system or you're doing a net new GTS Edition for HANA implementation. And in the end, we also have a special guest, McKee from SAP GTS Solution Management, who will share the roadmap as well as some details around the newest release of Edition for HANA, which is 2023. So without further ado, let's introduce our speakers and get going. A little message first from Lennox. This presentation is protected. Any distribution of this presentation without their express permission is prohibited. Vicente, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Vicente Amado. I'm the Lennox Assistant General Counsel for Global Trade Compliance. I've been working for Lennox for 4.5 years. Before that, I worked for Rolls-Royce Power Systems as a senior manager, imports and transportation, and we use GTS there. And before that, I worked for the Counsel Products for 9 years, a compressor manufacturer. I am a lawyer in Venezuela. I have a couple of master's degrees, and I'm happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda?
Yep, thank you, Jitendra. My name is Linda McKee. I am the solution manager for our Global Trade Services solution based here in the US. Work with our development teams around the world, largely based in Europe and China, but also colleagues here in the US. So really try and serve as a bridge between our development teams and all of the new innovation that's coming, and you, our customers, to try and roll out the information so you're aware of opportunities to take advantage of some new functionality. So appreciate the opportunity and look forward to any questions after the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And my name is Jitendra Singh. I'm the Ropaar founder and practice lead, focused on global trade, transportation, and logistics. A little bit about us. We're a SAP services company, so our solution focuses global trade, transportation, and logistics. So the supply chain execution products in SAP's portfolio. So our primary focus is on global trade services, transportation management, S4 international trade, watch list screening, as well as enterprise warehouse management and logistics business network. We've been in business for about 13 years, and during the course of those 13 years, had the pleasure of implementing almost 100 small and big implementations across the globe. We're also an SAP Services Silver Partner, and specifically in the area of global trade, our specializations include import and export self-filing, Lately, a lot of that is focused on the union custom code changes in Europe, as well as all the implications for NCTS Phase 5 for country-specific systems like Atlas DMS in Netherlands, Atlas in Germany, AES in Belgium. Some of our other specializations include foreign trade zone management of U.S. foreign trade zones. We're one of the few partners that have capabilities in this area, as well as free trade agreement entitlement across the globe, across different regions. Okay, without further ado, I'm gonna hand it over to Vicente, who's gonna walk you through the introduction of Lennox as a company, as well as the business rationale for Lennox to move from their legacy GTM to Global Trade Services Edition for HANA. Vicente?
Thank you, Jitendra. As you see here, these are some of the pros that Lennox International and all its divisions manufacture. Okay, Lennox is a provider of climate control solutions for heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and refrigeration markets. The company is based outside Dallas in Richardson, Texas, and has operations internationally, mostly based in North America, Mexico, US, and Canada. But we have a tech center that has like 600 people in India, and a small sourcing office in China. The ticker is LII in the New York Stock Exchange. And our CEO is Alo Mascara. The company was founded in 1895. It has approximately 13,000 employees and a market capital of $13 billion. Then, if you see this quote, you will understand why it's so important, compliance. If you think that compliance is expensive, try to know compliance. And this is quoted by a former Deputy Attorney General. And as you know, since 2018, we're having a new trade compliance reality. There are the 301 Chinese tariffs, the 232 aluminum and steel tariffs, the restrictions and measures on exports, Ukraine invasion, COVID, supply chain issues, forced labor enforcement by US Customs and Border Protection, and China and Russia new export regulations. As also the company, Lennox, is way bigger than when we got the former legacy system. The company has increased 140% in trade activity. Then we need a tool that can accommodate all these needs and new challenges that we are experiencing. Then trade compliance encompasses all the organization processes and procedure that ensure that it complies with all the domestic and international trade rules, regulations, and laws. And these are some of the most important subjects that should be covered by a trade compliance system to help you to manage the information, the records in a systematic way. As you can see here, it's included tariff classification, products valuation, denied party screening, export controls, import and export licenses, and preferential and non-preferential rules of origin. And then when we did our study about what we should do in order to choose the correct global trade system, we try to check in three different drivers. The first one is the time efficiency, the second one is the compliance, and the third one is finding cost savings or at least getting cost avoidance. And it's reflected in these three words that we have here: ERP integration, compliance, and future improvements. In the previous company that I worked for, GTS was in place for 14 years, the same version, and it worked pretty well. of course, it doesn't have all the attributes that we have for this version that Lennox International bought, but it was very reliable, fully compatible with SAP, and it was used for several years. Okay, then let's move to the next slide to talk about each of the drivers one by one, please. Then when we talk about ERP integration, we're talking about time efficiency. And if you see the first one, the ERP integration latency, when you compare the legacy GTM against GTS, the customer master is being reviewed 144 times per day. On the case of the previous system, it was just once a day. The transactional data is done in real time. And the transactional data in the legacy system is every 20 minutes. Can you click the next? Okay. The volume and speed of the data also is 5 times higher from GTS to the previous system. Can you move to the next? When you share, when you search products, you can upload a spreadsheet with hundreds and hundreds of part numbers. And if you want to find HTSs or countries of origin, you can do it in GTS. When we're trying to do that in the legacy system, you have to do it one by one. Okay. And then there is a suppression list. There is a exclusion list where you take out some specific terms that are related to the type of activity that you do in order to avoid so many false positives. For example, when you are running the night party screening, you wanna, and we are talking about companies such as Lennox, we're talking about terms like air conditioning, refrigeration, ventilation, heating, cooling, and things like that. Then you can take them out, and they're not gonna hit each time that you are running a search. Okay. And here we are talking on the functional comparison with the legacy system is about the compliance portion. And then we have the sanction party list. In the case of GTS, we get a content provider, and the content provider, you can go from 67 lists or less to 150. We now are using 67 lists. And we use 2 forced labors because lists, because they are very important nowadays, and of course they are searching in real time. And on the legacy system that we were using before, it goes up to 64 lists, and there were those lists that the owner of the system were deciding to get, not the ones that we were interested for. We cannot select from a catalog. Okay. In the case of the HTS, you can storage several. The harmonized tariff schedule is different from country to country, although until the first 6 digits, the tariff codes for every country should be similar. There are some exceptions, but you can storage as many countries' harmonized tariff schedules in GTS. Several of them. In the case of the legacy system in GTM, it was only US, Canada, and Mexico. Next. When you do the document screening, you touch things from the beginning. If something is wrong with in the GTS system with the documentation, then you will know it right away when you write the PO. But also going to check the sales order, but also it's going to check the outbound delivery, and in real time. In the case of the outbound delivery in the legacy system, the problem with that one is that sometimes you are not screening in real time, and those can go through. That was an issue that we have with that tool. Okay. And of course, you can do direct filing with the broker or with customs, and with the former legacy system, it was not possible. In the case of the future improvements, what we call potential savings or cost avoided. And these are tools that we're gonna talk a little bit about here that are gonna help to get some relief from the new trade compliance reality, okay? Then you have free trade zones. For example, you are bringing products from China, but you're gonna do a turnaround and those products are gonna go to the Caribbean. They don't wanna pay tariffs or duties in the US, entering the free trade zone, leave the free trade zone, they are being sent to the Caribbean. And you're doing that for logistics reasons. There are more routes, vessel routes are going to the US than directly from China to one of these countries in the Caribbean. Then it's better to send it to US and then move it through those places. You can also do calculations about rules of origin and bill of materials. You can validate free trade agreements and avoid to pay duties in some cases, merchandise processing fee and harbor maintenance fee in other cases. You can do duty drawback or you can establish a bonded warehouse. As I said, these tools are going to give you some relief and you're going to get some potential gains because of the new trade compliance reality. And here you can this is a table to compare side by side the three last slides that we presented to you. And as you see, for example, in the future improvements, GTS covers all the areas, and the legacy GTM cannot. In the ERP integration, there is more time efficiency and possibilities with GTS than the legacy system. And in the functional improvements, as you see, there are more lists that can be used. There are more countries that can storage HTSs, and the function related to the vendor and customer eligibility works in GTS, but it doesn't work on the legacy system. The screening, which is very important, it works also much more on the GTS than in the legacy system. Then this is a project that is still going. We have accomplished phase 1 and phase 2, and we are starting at this moment to move to phase 3 and phase 4. Phase 3, we want to try to implement trade preference agreements, vendor and customer eligibility, rules of origin, and that's going to be at the beginning of next year, and then doing the duty drawback on the warehouse and free trade zones next year. We did. It took us a little bit more time to do the implementation, but we are very happy with the results, because we did an implementation in phases. And Jitendra will talk more about on the lessons learned about this. Thank you, Jitendra.
Vicente, thank you very much. So before I move on to the lessons learned, I think I just wanted to provide some context in terms of what the situation was for Lennox, as well as the functional footprint of the this first 1 and 2 phases of implementation. So from a system standpoint, Lennox had a legacy GTM that was hooked up to SAP ECC system. So for context, they're still on an ECC system that was put in place almost 17 or 18 years ago. Obviously, it's gone through multiple upgrades, a lot of change over the course of years, new businesses bought as well as sold. So lots of business processes that exist in the system, a lot of data that exists in the system over those decade plus of using ECC, which was then essentially using a legacy global trade management system, which was obviously not real time, had a lot of deficiencies in terms of the amount of data it could handle, how many, well, in terms of richness of functionality too, as Vicente mentioned, because of these new trade compliance realities, a lot of functional improvements, which is expected as almost stable stakes for most global trade management systems, did not exist. So that's kind of the context of how the environment was for Lennox when they decided to adopt Edition for HANA, as well as go through this first phase of implementation, which was completed in March or April this year. So it's been a few months now since it's been live. So let's move on to the lessons learned. And so what we've done is we've kind of broken up our lessons learned into two specific buckets. The first one, because there's a lot of interest in Edition for HANA as the successor product to GTS Global Trade Services version 11, we've kind of broken up these lessons into ones that are specific to Edition for HANA, the challenges we had and challenges which were specific to the context of Lennox. And then we're going to move into the actual lessons learned, which would apply to any customer, regardless of what, where they were coming from, whether it was a new implementation or coming from a legacy GTM system. These are some of the Edition for HANA specific lessons, and let me preface it before we go into the details. So this is still GTS Edition for HANA 2020. And since then, we've had another release in June, which Linda will go into in just a few more slides. So some of these challenges have been overcome either through alternatives or through added functionality, which you'll come to know later. But the context here is this is GTS Edition for HANA 2020, the first release of the product. And the other context here is the fact that Lennox is not on S4HANA as the ERP system, which means some of the technologies that were introduced in Edition for HANA were new, and that posed some challenges as well. So one of the first things from lessons learned is the fact that the major change for Edition for HANA is the complete revamp of the user interface. So as with moving from SAP ECC to S4HANA, moving from GTS 11 to GTS Edition for HANA introduces the Fiori browser-based interface as the primary user interface for business users. And to the extent that all the SAP GUI transactions that you're used to in a GTS 11 system are shut off from usage. From an architectural standpoint, that introduces some decision making upfront as well. So the support for both Fiori front-end server as a hub in a hub mode as well as an embedded mode is supported. But as you're planning out your projects, that's something to keep in mind. If there is an S4HANA system and there is a possibility of using a hub front-end, Fiori front-end server, there are optimization possibilities as well. The GTS Edition for HANA 2023, there are even more landscape optimization possibilities, which again will be covered in a few more slides. But obviously for Lennox, that did not apply because they're on ECC, and this was kind of their first introduction to Fiori user interface. So one of the things we also ran into was so as a project and as an IT standardization, the decision was made that all business users for GTS would be through the Fiori apps and the Fiori tiles, which means a lot of local users that are in distribution centers or even retail stores that are responsible for shipping in and out would basically be accessing GTS from a Fiori-based user interface, which means they will not have access to SAP GUI, which in turn meant that we needed to ensure every single business function was mapped to some Fiori tile, so that that there's no access to SAP GUI, so it wasn't a choice. One of the challenges we ran into was there were certain apps which were missing. Again, for context, this is edition for HANA 2020, which have now been added in later releases. But things like technically incomplete documents, establishing default data, output, etc., were only accessible through SAP GUI. This is not the entire catalog of what was required, but was not in Fiori. But from a major business functions, we were covered as far as Fiori user interface was concerned. But there were definitely instances where we had to find an alternative. And the alternative there was exposing a lot of these SAP GUI T codes into the Fiori Launchpad. And from a IT technical ability standpoint, there is a certain amount of learning curve. It's like any new technology. It's not something that's insurmountable, but something as you're planning your projects, you need to keep in mind the ability to be able to expose these T codes, SAP GUI T codes as Fiori tiles on a Fiori Launchpad, so that you can standardize on a single browser-based user interface. In the business, so going on to the next lesson learned. So this is another example of business user requirements, which were at the time of 2020 were not fully covered, but are now in the newest release for 2023. So when we're managing export declarations, so active export declaration, there was, for example, missing number search, reference number search, which means if you're coming in with document numbers from your ECC system, there wasn't an easy way to search based on that. Another missing option was this activity sequence view, which allows business users to see in the life cycle of an export, which step a particular export declaration is in before it's completely responded to and falls out of the active export declarations. So again, I mean, these are little things that we had to keep in mind. They're not insurmountable. You could still see the step the export declaration was in. You just couldn't see how many steps were still pending or how many steps had happened already before. So there's something to keep in mind. But on the brighter side, there was an enterprise search function, which almost functions as a Google search. So without any context of what document number is, whether it's a sales order or a delivery note or a pro forma billing document, you could easily just plug the number in the search box and find anything that matched it. So some things that didn't quite work exactly as we would have hoped for, and others where we were pleasantly surprised, which definitely improved the user experience a lot. So moving on to the next lesson learned, again, just because of the change in technology going from SAP GUI to Fiori-based user interface, the security team at Lennox had to reorient their thinking in terms of how to build the roles, how to conceptually think about them, and having not gone through that experience in an S4 HANA implementation, there was a little bit of a learning curve for them to build the right roles, think of business roles in terms of what business process we're trying to execute on, which catalog it belongs to and what group it belongs to, as opposed to just deciding this transaction code belongs to this type of business user, which is which is the type of concept that you're typically using when you're building user roles using using the traditional SAP GUI. So from a Edition for HANA specific lesson, one of the other major ones, again, this is a lesson 1 year hence. So as we were going into the project and looking for content, there was what we had to keep in mind was that the trade content that is compatible for Edition for HANA was a requirement. So any HS code that we procured or ECCMs had to be compatible for Edition for HANA. And some of the trade, basically the data content providers were a little bit behind the 8 ball in terms of making content ready to be available at the time that we needed it to be available in our development cycle, in our QA cycle, and obviously in our production cycle as well. So at the time that we went live, thankfully, all that content for countries was available in the GTS Edition for HANA format, and it ended up not impacting any kind of having any kind of timeline impact. But as you are planning projects, one thing you need to keep in mind is have that conversation early and often with your content provider to make sure it's available for Edition for HANA. Primarily, this impacts HS, ECCNs. It does not impact SPL, denied party screening content, which stays the same going from GTS 11 to Edition for HANA. Okay, so moving on to some of the lessons that were specific to this project, and this is more general in nature. Obviously with the context that Lennox is coming from an ECC and legacy GTM environment to this Edition for HANA implementation. Unfortunately for us, during the course of the project, there were significant IT and business SME changes during the course of the project. What that meant, so again, this is 2022, the time of great migration, and one of the things that impacted was the fact that, and which you need to account for in your projects, is to make sure that the business scenarios catalog is complete. There's a lot of tribal knowledge for an ECC implementation that's 16, 17 years old, wherein hard as you may try, there will be surprises in terms of this niche specific business processes that do not happen very often, but from a trade compliance standpoint, there's no excuse as far as if you're going to cross the border. There are some obligations both on the export side as well as on the import side. You need to account for them no matter what. One of the ways we tried to essentially mitigate this impact was by involving business users from specific sites, from high volume sites, to make sure all of these niche processes which don't happen every day as far as movement of goods across borders goes were accounted for. So example in this case was a transshipment process wherein products leaving Lennox's IMEX facilities are shipped to Canada, but they are transshipped through the US, which impose some other requirements as far as reporting on the US side, and then making sure all the documentation basically satisfied not just US import requirement or US movement under bond requirement, but also satisfied the actual import that will happen in Canada. Another example was milk runs across the northern border, so multiple ship tos, which again impose some requirements on the exporting side to make sure we have all the proper documentation that shows ultimate ship tos for all of the milk run end companies. So going to the next lesson learned, project specific lesson learned around customized ECC processes. So again, for context, there was already a legacy global trade management process, and trying to use the same legacy integration for GTS purposes posed some challenges as well, just from a timing standpoint and a conceptual standpoint as well. So Lennox is a big user of the shipment documents, which basically comprise of everything that's going in a particular group as a transport, which was the point of integration between legacy. And as you know, for global trade services, the integration from the export standpoint comes at the point of pro forma billing document. So repurposing that legacy integration was a challenge, both timing as well as making sure the integration didn't impose any additional steps or in as far as the business users go. So to make it as transparent as possible for them, so they complete the shipment and they receive the documents without ever even noticing whether it's coming from a legacy GTM versus an SAP GTS system. Again, these are just some more examples of customized ECC processes. So import invoice valuation, especially for products shipping out from an IMEX standpoint. So signifying basically only value add in the IMEX facility on their invoices versus value of the complete product when you're importing into Canada. So all these things have to be accounted for. Another common problem that we run into, which also happened to be an issue at Lennox, was trying to make sure that the shipment is represented as a single export declaration, basically allowing for the split criteria for billing documents in a way that the shipment represents an export declaration, produces a single set of documents, and because that imposes practical issues on both on the export side as well as on the import side, treating a shipment, for example, importing with multiple documents poses a challenge for brokers to use multiple import invoices, for example, versus a single import invoice. So again, these are specific, project-specific lessons for Lennox's implementation. For context, again, this is a 17-year-old ECC system that consisted of several parts which were at some point or the other were discontinued. There were legacy HS codes that were assigned in GTM, which had to be managed as a part of the conversion going from legacy GTM to GTS. So, when you're talking about 1 million plus parts plus country-specific HS code, that is a significant effort. And for the size of the team we had, for the size of the business team we had, that was a big challenge in terms of making sure all active parts that are involved in any type of goods movement across these borders were properly classified. So another lesson learned was the broker format changes. So if you're familiar with Edition for HANA broker solution, it comes with its own XML broker format, which essentially includes all the data that you could possibly expect in an import or an export declaration. One of the challenges we had was trying to get the broker of choice that Lennox uses to standardize on this legacy format and making them march to the same project timeline that we had in mind as far as go live concerned. What complicated this effort was also conceptual changes in how, what kind of reference numbers, for example, Livingston, the broker was used to coming from legacy format versus going to GTS. So just keep in mind, just handing an implementation guide is not enough. You have to go through a really tight testing process with multiple iterations with a broker, so that they completely understand the meaning. Regardless of what you put in the implementation guide, you still need to handhold their understanding of the broker XML that comes out of GTS, so they can consume it in their own systems and be able to file export or import or whatever service they're providing for you. So the next lesson learned is essentially focused on broker standardization, going from, we started with Livingston, but there were two other brokers, Alco and Transplace. So making the format in a way that works for Livingston, and then not having to redo or make any changes, but to have this global standard that could work regardless of geography and regardless of the broker on the other hand, was another challenge. But it's something that you need to account for as you're going through your project planning as well. The last lesson learned here is primarily around business readiness. And we knew we had a small project team, but we had several facilities that would be impacted the moment you go live. So Vicente and his IT counterpart essentially decided to do a staggered go live in order to spread out the impact. So we knew the day we go live, there's going to be lots of questions, because we remember, regardless of the training, these business users have been using the legacy GTM for a long time. And they are used to a certain look of the documents. They are used to a certain process flow. The moment we switch over, things that may look like a problem may really not be a problem. It might just be a change in format going from legacy to GTS. So we expected a lot of questions, and we did get a lot of questions, but the mitigation here was to kind of stagger the go live, and what that meant was keeping GTS and legacy GTM both active at the same time, and turning off legacy GTM slowly over time, facility by facility. Okay, I think those are some of the only, those are the lessons we had. I'm going to hand it over to Linda, who's going to go over the roadmap and maybe share some insights about SAP GTS latest release, Edition for HANA 2023.
Definitely. Thanks much, Jitendra. If I could speak, I've been sitting here too long. Yeah, we can go ahead and go on to the next slide, because I want to be sure I don't fill up any time for questions at the end of this. There's always usually a number of them. Some of what I share might answer a few of those questions. This is just to highlight the amount of time SAP has been supporting our global trade services solution. We celebrated our 20th anniversary last year, so we've been in the market quite some time, and obviously there's a lot of knowledge and depth of capability that's been built over that time. The last of the previous releases, as Jitendra had mentioned, was GTS 11. It was initially released in 2015, so it does currently carry an end of standard maintenance date of end of December 2025. So for us, it's very important to get the word out about the current version, which is the GTS edition for HANA. It's now been in the market since 2021. It has taken a bit of time to get some traction in terms of adoption, but we're really strongly urging everyone to really start looking and considering a transition plan to this new edition, so you're not surprised by that end of standard maintenance for GTS 11 at the end of 2025. We are on a 2-year release cycle now with the edition for HANA. The first one came out as a 2020. For that year, we largely worked on some early adopters. It was generally available in 2021. Now we've come out with the next release in 2023, June of this year, and then the next one is planned for 2025 and 27 and so on. So whereas previously the release dates of new versions were a bit staggered, not always known, now we've got a more consistent release cycle. Support pack releases associated with those cycles will be moving to twice a year. So hopefully that will help everyone with their planning and awareness of, as new releases come out, look for some of the new capabilities and start thinking about upgrades as those new releases come out. Go on to the next one. Wanted to highlight, get a lot of questions. We've had some slides that show what came out with that initial 2020 release and then others with this 2023 release. So this really represents the major new capabilities that have come out since that last release of GTS 11. Jitendra's already talked about the new Fiori UI. That is a required user interface. That's what the standard user interface will be going forward with the addition for HANA. Hopefully, as you get through that change management associated with familiarizing your users, they will start to recognize a lot of the benefits that really do come with this Fiori UI. Also, with this addition, GTS is available only on a HANA database, thus the name, Edition for SAP HANA. Previous versions would support virtually any SAP supported database, and going forward, it will require this HANA database. But with that does come some of the improved performance that does come with a HANA database in terms of just seeing faster response times. Usually with transactions, you can process more data more quickly. So hopefully you'll be seeing some of those benefits as well. On a more technical note, with this year's release, we have what's called our co-deployment option. We still offer GTS in a standalone environment. Obviously, cloud is the way forward around SAP, but GTS is still available on a cloud or on-premise implementation. But with co-deployment, that is specific to a private cloud implementation, and you do have to have an S4HANA private cloud infrastructure and S4HANA available. And while we still do, again, offer the standalone GTS, with co-deployment, what it does is allow us to offer really, I would say, reduced pricing, because we deliver GTS just with the application itself. GTS uses the S4HANA private cloud infrastructure. So there's a dependency now between those two systems. They get installed on separate clients, but now if one system has to be brought down for some updates, upgrades, it's going to impact both systems. So while some of the pricing can be more attractive, we do always encourage everyone to consider what would the impact be if the S4HANA system had to come down, and it's going to impact your GTS system as well. There are some new analytics capabilities, with some of them embedded within the solution. So with the Fiori UI, when you go into a work list, as opposed to just seeing a list of perhaps blocked documents, you now have the option to also include some graphical representation of all of that information, so that you can very quickly identify how many blocked documents do I have, or which countries are being most impacted with these export declarations. And it really does give the user a nice visual to more quickly identify where they may need to focus their activities. We also have integration now, not only with the BW for HANA, but also the SAP Analytics Cloud. So you can really leverage that GTS data. Within GTS 11, you could buy an add-on. It was called identity-based preference processing, that allow you to run your preference processing, do determination of which free trade agreements your goods will qualify for, at a level below just a product SKU or ID. It could go down to, say, a batch level for that product. So if you're getting materials from different source countries, different suppliers, you may manage those as batches, and you want to qualify them for preference based on those batches. Now that is part of the standard GTS Edition for HANA bundle that came available in 2023. And with that, we'd also done some work about some of the long-term supplier declarations, where now there's some electronic exchange of those declarations on an intercompany basis. So if previously you were having your plant in Germany, for example, receiving supplier declarations that other entities or other plants needed, you can exchange those now more easily within your company. On the import side, we've expanded the support for the PGA, or partner government agency filings. So there were some restrictions previously, didn't necessarily have all of the data elements available for all of the various agencies. I think there's 40 plus agencies. So we've expanded that support and framework. So now we can support virtually any of those PGAs with your import filing. I will caution, this does not mean we're delivering out of the box templates or pre-configuration for, say, ATF filings or FDA filings. There is still some configuration work required, but at least it can support all of those various agencies. We've rounded off the intrastat localization. The only country we previously hadn't supported was Malta. That is now there. So now we have full support for all of the member states associated with intrastat reporting. Brazil localization, that's some of the newest localization. We hadn't really added new countries for some time. So now we can provide some basic import-export support for Brazil. I will be transparent and say both import and export are currently available if you have an S/4HANA public cloud as your backend system. Whereas for a private cloud, currently it's the standard export processing, with us looking forward to hopefully be able to provide that on the import side as well. Main reasoning for that is really more on the S4 side. Some of you may be familiar with the electronic invoicing process in Brazil called Envio Nota Fiscal Eletrônica. It required some work on the S4 side as well. So that's why there is a limiter in terms of the availability of those scenarios. And then we've also done some enhancements to our integration with transportation management, have had integration for quite some time, but TM is coming out or has released some new, what they call advanced shipping and receiving. So we had to make updates to leverage that ASR capability, as that really is the strategic direction for TM. So now with GTS, you can also support if you are using that ASR capability. And it's largely focused on the compliance at that freight order level around things like screening, embargo, and licensing. Had touched on, Jitendra mentioned some of the functional enhancements we've seen. As he had mentioned, they had not been able to have that search capability, and now we have this enterprise search capability, and there's some ability to what we call set a processor. You could almost think of it as a workflow where maybe you're working on a screening block. You would like to release it, but it's going to require authorization from a manager. Right from that block document, you can, what they call set a processor, select that manager's name from a dropdown, and it would automatically then forward that document to that authorized person. So we can go ahead and go forward. Looking more specifically at the roadmap itself, won't go through all the recent innovations. That was really on the previous slide. What we're focused on right now, Jitendra mentioned all of these UCC changes happening in Europe. There's a huge amount of effort. Every country requires its own updates. So we're heavily working on delivering all of those, especially there's a number of them coming later this year and into 2024, even into 2025. There is also, they're calling it now centralized clearance within the EU. This was a program they had somewhat offered previously where you can file all of your customs declarations for every country that you do business with within the EU through one single customs country. So if you operate in every EU country, but you want to submit all of the declarations associated with all of those goods movements to all of those countries, you could do that through just Germany, for example. So we'll be supporting that within GTS as well, and interested to see how many folks take that up. It sounds like it could be something that could be of a lot of benefit to folks. We always are continuing not only the UCC updates, but Interstat updates. And then one key thing also, a lot of you may have service orders or another order type called a solution order in addition for HANA or in S4HANA. So now we'll be supporting GTS and those new order types. And then looking forward, as I said, we're on a 2-year release cycle, so we're already working on the 2025 release. One of the key areas we're looking on is extending some of the GTS capabilities by not necessarily touching that core code in GTS, but delivering some new web services that we would deliver out on our business technology platform, or BTP. Things like leveraging artificial intelligence to help you with your classification activities. So we'll start sharing more on that as we get closer, but you can start looking for that. And then one other area relative to origin management, this has also been something that's been requested for some time, but currently origin management is more focused on preference, and we do plan to start supporting that non-preferential origin in the future. So apologize if I took a bit of your Q&A time there, but always available for questions and follow-up, of course. And I do want to highlight some of the help information. There's a lot of documentation out there that I'm always concerned people don't know about, but I would suggest hopefully the link will work. You can go out to the SAP help portal. If you look for the GTS edition for HANA, you can use the abbreviation E4H. You have all of this information available. In the application help, you can go in and see what's new for every version back to 2020 to 2023, and then as each support pack comes out, we share via this portal some of the new capabilities, so you're always able to see what's come out recently in any new support packs. But it's a lot of really valuable information. It also gives you a link, something not listed here, to a legal change portal, so you can see and keep track of and be aware of legal changes that have been released or are planned to be released in the near future. So some valuable information in that help portal.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Linda. I really appreciate it. Vicente, thanks for your time. I know we're almost over the hour, but we do have a few questions. If you can stick around just a little bit. I think the first one is maybe for you, Vicente. So one of the questions is, what moved the needle in favor of implementing GTS edition for HANA? So in your own words, if you could just, I think you kind of covered it in the slides, but would be nice to.
There are a couple of things. Our competitors, most of our competitors use GTS. Then we decided that was a good thing to have. And the other thing is that we are one of the top 10 importers at the port of Laredo in Texas. Then means that we import high volumes of merchandise every year. And we're gonna be held accountable to the amounts that we are importing, and we should have a system according to that. And the appropriate system to have was GTS. We also work with a consultant company that helped us to make the decision. But besides the opinion from the consultant company, we thought about these two facts, and we decide, well, we have to go for it. Okay.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
The next one is, when is SAP planning for support end of life for GTS version 11.
Yep.
Maybe that's for
Touched on that. It is that December 31st, 2025 will have been in the market for 10 years, and Edition for HANA will have been available for 5 years. So at this point, there's no planning to extend that beyond that 2025 date.
The next one we have is if there are any compatibility issues when you're moving from GTS 11 to E4H. I think it might be focused on the data content providers. Do you want to take that? Or I think from a compatibility standpoint, I mean, for HS and ECCNs, you have to have data that's E4H compatible. But if you are on a GTS 11 system and you do an in-place upgrade, the software update manager will go through a conversion process. So there is a conversion process for your existing classifications. They'll be moved into the new tables, which are relevant for E4H. But you do have to procure data that's E4H compatible. You have to also do some configuration as a part of the Edition for HANA. As a part of the upgrade to Edition for HANA. Anything to add, Linda? Does that sound?
Nope, I think you pretty well covered it, unless they had a different meaning with the compatibility.
So any ECC being on-prem, GTS on HANA Cloud, any timing issue for transactions, definitely in the case of Lennox and a few other customers that we've had, in a similar boat, we have not. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it, you know, as far as network latency and all that has to be part of your landscape planning. But, you know, going forward, obviously, everything is going to be on cloud, so that should also go away, if there is any. Are there any changes in the way we load data from the data provider? Can you please elaborate on this? Not really. It's the files and the content format itself that has changed, but the way you load data still stays the same. There's another concept now in between a numbering scheme. So without getting into too much detail, but that allows you to go from one content provider to another if you ever choose to do so, and that's part of the reason why you know, at the table level some of the things have changed for
And maybe
from 11 to 12.
And maybe I'll just mention that with the Edition for HANA, the search algorithm that's available for screening, there's a HANA search, and then there's also the classic search. I will point out T-Rex is no longer available or supported with an Edition for HANA, but if you do move to the HANA search algorithm, it does really streamline that process of, as the content comes in. There were multiple steps required previously to really make that data available for the screening, and it's really streamlined the steps that are required to start making use of those new lists as they're loaded.
Thank you. What would you say is the biggest change between GTS 11 and E4H from a business value addition perspective? Do you want to take a shot? I can add. Or
yeah. I'll take it from our sort of utopian view, and then maybe you can add some of the reality. One, the UI, giving the business user a lot more flexibility. Oh, sorry. I apologize. Can I come back to you real quick? I'm going to move someone away from my door. You want to answer?
no problem. I can take this. So I think from a business value standpoint, the biggest benefit that we're seeing is you know, just from a user interface consistency. You know, going with Edition for HANA 2023, there's also the possibility to do co-deployment. So what that means is you can install Edition for HANA as another client on your S4HANA system. So from a landscape optimization, there's like immense benefits there, as well as, you know, obviously there's an impact to your licensing costs, you know, server costs, etc. So user interface consistency as well as landscape optimization, I think, are the two most beneficial reasons why you would want to move, if not later, then at least earlier.
So sorry for that.
That's fine. So I just mentioned the possibility of core deployment as well as user interface consistency between S4HANA and GTS.
Yep. And just taking advantage of all the new innovation that's coming. Again, with that end of life or end of standard maintenance, I guess I should be more cautious of 11.0. Any of the new innovations going to be coming with that addition for HANA. So realize that's almost more of a technical issue, but if you want added business value with added functionality, it's going to be there on the addition for HANA.
Right. So Brazil localization, for instance, is only going to be available in addition for HANA.
And I will mention that Jitendra probably has more knowledge about that than just about anyone. So
Thank you. Are there any changes in connecting to SeaBurger for electronic declarations?
I will share, technically the same. We haven't made major changes. If you are moving to the GTS in a cloud environment, however, our policies don't allow us to connect that GTS edition for HANA to, let's say, an old SeaBurger on-prem of their BIS solution. We do have to make that connection to the SeaBurger cloud. So previously there had been an entitlement with your GTS license for the usage of SeaBurger's on-prem solution. When you move to Edition for HANA, that entitlement does not exist for the SeaBurger cloud solution. So it would require some direct work with SeaBurger right now to establish that contract to allow you to use their cloud BIS server, connecting a GTS private cloud to the SeaBurger BIS. We are working to try and make that available so you could get that from SAP. We would still be working with SeaBurger. It just would streamline the process for you to work and manage that through SAP. But right now, it does require you directly working with SeaBurger.
Well, I think that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you very much, Linda. And thanks a lot, Vicente. Really appreciate. I hope this was useful to you. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you much.
Bye.